The most recent Tower of Adversity reset has some of the player base in absolute shambles. While most of the floors, buffs, and bosses are similar to what we fought before, there's a new addition on the left tower that's been causing players some problems. Some are even calling it whale bait. That's an over-exaggeration. With that, welcome to a new series where I'll be focusing on Wuthering Waves' recurring endgame mode, the Hazard Tower. As one of the main sources of Astrite and best measures of your account's progression, clearing all of these battles at maximum stars is one of the biggest achievements any player can make across their account. And I've taken the time to tackle all of this content with a wide variety of teams, free-to-play options, and niche picks to give you all an informed overview of what to expect. As always, if you're enjoying this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. 1.3 second tower reset brought with it two new favored attributes, Arrow on the left side and Fusion on the right. This presents some unique challenges for many players based off one fact. There's only one true Arrow main DPS in the game, and that man, Jian, was also the very first limited banner in Wuthering Waves. That meant there's a lot of reasons for why players might not feel ready for this zone. They could have skipped Jian for one of the other limited characters after him, they could have simply started the game after the first 2 weeks of 1.0, or they're just not a fan of his playstyle and don't intend on building him. These troubles are only amplified by the fact that the left side of the tower also introduced a brand new boss that we've only seen in the highest difficulty overdrive zone. That boss is the Fallacy of No Return, or for many players, the Fallacy of No Rewards. For all the reasons we've listed, many are finding the final floor absolutely impossible without that whale level of investment or Jian. However, the fact of the matter is that this floor is entirely possible, with plenty of time to spare even with characters who don't deal arrow damage. The journey to reaching the boss on either side of the tower is simple, with the first 3 floors completely soloable by a single DPS character. This is a great way to save energy across your sustainers or sub-DPS characters who might find better use in other areas, like the middle tower or another boss. The enemies across this reset aren't nearly as challenging as prior ones, where mobs like the Light Crusher or Lumiscale Construct had a lot of potential to halt your clears leading up to the boss. When it came to the left side and the Fallacy of No Return, there are some very specific tools you want across your characters to have the best chance of clearing. Those tools are a massive amount of Concerto energy generation and traction, or the ability to group enemies. This means that some of the ideal characters for this fight include Verena, who has some of the fastest Concerto generation in the game, especially when equipped with Variation, Yang Yang, who similarly has one of the fastest rotations in the game, as well as a low AoE but long duration grouping, and for the ideal main DPS characters, you'll want Shang Li Yao, and of course, Jian. While Jinxie might seem like a decent pick, the spectral resistance on the Fallacy makes this a poor choice for the encounter. These traits are especially effective because this floor starts with 4 enemies, the Exile Shielder Lady and 3 Exile Gunners. Having no grouping at all for this first wave can turn the floor into an absolute nightmare, with all of the enemies running around in different directions, while having characters like Zhang Li Yao, Yang Yang, or Jian can reliably allow you to damage all 4 of these adds at once, saving as much time as possible for the real challenge of the floor, the Fallacy. The most difficult part about this boss isn't its damage or tankiness, it's the fact that it teleports around like somebody with cheat codes enabled. This is where Concerto efficiency and rapid access to intro skills becomes key. That's because intro skills inflict a massive amount of damage to enemy stagger bars, and staggering the Fallacy is one of the only ways to reliably damage it once it starts entering its second phase. This makes a character like Verena, who has a much faster rotation time than Shorekeeper, actually a lot better for this fight. Shorekeeper is also heavily dragged down by the fact that the only meaningful damage in her kit, her enhanced intro, will deal far less damage due to the boss's spectral resistance. This also means that Yang Yang might be the best overall character for this entire floor. Despite being a 4-star, she has a unique combination of grouping and fantastic Concerto energy generation, while other characters only have one of these traits. Factor in how the floor also gives an arrow buff, She's the go-to pick for any player, assuming they're not using Jian to clear this content. She is so effective that I was able to clear with a wide variety of characters, even with the level 85 Encore as the main DPS. Zhongli Yao is another fantastic pick due to his insane initial grouping on his Resonance Liberation as well as his unmatched gap closing when using his enhanced skills during his burst mode. With most players claiming him for completely free in version 1.2, you can combine him with his best-in-slot sub-DPS, Yinlin, use him with Yang Yang, or even run him in dual DPS compositions for very comfortable clears. A team with Havoc Rover and Verena will easily get the job done as well, while also being one of the most budget teams in the game. And if you own Jian, you should have no problems with this floor at all. He's the next limited character up, and the entire left side, with its specific buff to heavy attack, is clearly designed for him. However, the general buff of 20% attack simply on casting a Resonance Liberation is enough of a bonus for any non-spectral DPS to clear. Fusion, on the other hand and side of the tower, has some very specific buffs to resonance skill damage, but much more manageable enemies like the Wind Gorilla. There are also plenty of DPS options in this category, with many free or standard choices like Qixia or Encore, as well as the very popular limited fusion DPS, Chongli. This means that there are plenty of compositions to choose from and no particular need to emphasize specific character traits like grouping. The floor's bonuses are received from casting an intro skill, but there's no need for rapid concerto generation as the buff doesn't stack and resets when the character leaves the field. That means that quick swap characters like Chongli don't gain a large benefit from the floor's bonuses, as she'll be constantly swapping out and resetting this buff. So you might have the best overall performance with a character like Encore in her hypercarry team with Sanhua, as you'll gain the most uptime on the buff and Encore's resonance skill is repeatedly cast during her liberation. However, the final floor on the right side isn't much of a challenge at all for built characters, as it's a single enemy without any annoying mechanics that eat into the timer, unlike the Fallacy. The Hazard Tower, or the middle zone, has buffs specifically tailored around team healing. The first floor is a basic encounter with the Thundering Mephis, and he's definitely near the top of the list in terms of most annoying bosses in the game. With constant teleportation, long-range attacks, and a lot of parry windows that eat into the timer, teams with a large amount of concerto energy and constant access to intro skills is one of the most convenient ways to tackle this boss. Much like the Fallacy, staggering this boss is one of the most reliable ways to actually damage it, and while it doesn't unlock a second phase that dramatically boosts its agility, it's an annoying gnat from the very start of the fight. Jinxie in particular is a very good choice here, given her relative invulnerability in the air to most of the Mephis' attacks, and her ability to burst the Mephis down during its downtime between attacks, instead of chasing after it like other characters. The last floor in the Hazard Tower is another one you'll want grouping for. Zhongli Yao or Jian will be the top picks here, as the first wave is filled with exiles, while Zhongli has the highest overall effectiveness due to his ability to chase down the Heron with his incredible mobility. A common trend you'll find is that this free limited character is oftentimes the best choice to tackle content in the tower. If you've gotten him for free, it's time to invest in him if you haven't yet. That wraps up our overview of 1.3's second tower reset. For most of the fights, it is business as usual, but the Fallacy is definitely a huge obstacle for players who haven't invested in or own the right tools. Be on the lookout for more content like this for future resets. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. Peace out.